We spend about 1/3 of our lives working. That does not include getting ready for work, getting to work, getting home from work, winding down from work. As tedious as that may sound, it does keep society from collapsing. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 19, Chapter 7.
Work.
Recently, Elon Musk predicted that in the foreseeable future, human jobs would become optional, largely due to quantum advancements in AI and robotics, two areas in which he and his companies are heavily invested. His theory, and it is Musk, so make of it what you will, is that personal incomes generated by our jobs would be replaced by a universal high income. Those monies from the highly increased productivity of machines versus that of humans. Eventually, money would become obsolete due to the abundance of goods and services. No jobs, no money, yet everything is provided for us. What will we do with ourselves? Well, that could be a problem. I mean, so far we haven't really made constructive use of the leisure time we've had so far. Imagine if that's all we had was leisure time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to all human jobs eliminated, or at least optional. The idea of not working, not having to work, no job to go to, no job to aspire to, is pretty fascinating. Because for the last 300 years or so, our lives have focused on having a job. Go to school, get an education, so that you can get a good job. Oh, and just so that you can understand what that means. While going to school, you could get a part-time job and a summer job, student jobs, so that you have a better appreciation of what it's going to be like to finish school and enter the job market. Grinding your way through all those shitty high school jobs would allegedly make you hanker for a good job. A little motivation, ambition. Ambition, generally thought of as a positive trait. I want a good job. A good job is status. Oh, look, such a responsible person with a good job. Or as someone else might say, he's got a decent job. You'd think good would be better than decent, but not when it comes to jobs. The difference is in who is describing it. I call it good, you say decent. We respect those who have good, decent jobs. You can even use it to defend your actions. Hey, I was just doing my job. And we as a whole tend to look down on those who don't have a job. Unemployed.
Are you employed, Mr. Lebowski?
Employed?
You don't go out looking for a job dressed like that, do you? On a weekday?
What day is this?
Doesn't even have a job. Can't seem to keep a job. Can't hold down a job. Hold down as if it's some feral wild animal, which it is. No job. You're a burden on society. Why can't you be good and decent? And you're asking, well, what about the great jobs? Yeah, I guess they exist. But how would you define a great job? It usually means you get paid a lot of money. The job itself may not be that great, but the pay is great. Ergo, great job. Also, perhaps, you don't have to work that hard. Don't have to work hard, make a lot of money. That's a great job. Oh, of course, I know there's also the people you work with, the work atmosphere, the benefits. But really, how many people say, I have a great job? And you know, you don't have to have a great job to be doing a great job. Hey, you're doing a great job. Good work. Your status just went up, because not only do you have a job, but you're apparently good at it. And again, the opposite. When you fail, you wear the scarlet letter of job failure, public shaming. You had one job.
My name is George. I'm unemployed and I live with my parents.
And there's also professions and vocations and careers. Yeah, I know, but they're all just jobs. And there are jobs out there whose mandate is how to get a job. Job counselors, employment advisors, career coaches. In sports and entertainment, you can have an agent or a manager. whose job it is to negotiate your job and salary. You have to get a job.
My advice to you is to do what your parents did. Get a job, sir.
At first, it's often called an entry-level job, but then you work hard, you get ahead, which actually means it's a harder job with more responsibility. Work harder. I remember they used to say, don't work harder, work smarter, whatever that means. I think what they meant was you'd be smart to work much harder. Just work, 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 so that one day you won't have to. Finally, after all those jobs, retirement, where you spend a lot of your time reflecting on how lucky you were to have a decent job. A good job. I'm always reminded of the old story. Two old guys meet fishing on a beach. One guy says to the other one, "What do you do?" The guy says, "Well, I sit on the beach and I fish." He goes, No, but what do you do? He goes, "That's all I've ever done is sit on this beach and fish." "What about you?" Guy says, "Well, I was an account manager for a large corporation. I worked overtime and weekends, eventually became a vice president, then a director. And after 50 years of that, I just retired last month." So the guy says, "Wow, what did you do all that for?" And he says, "Well, so that one day I could sit on a beach and fish." The job. Every week, the news media dutifully reports the job numbers, the unemployment rate. The number of people with jobs is a leading indicator of the health of an economy. Why? Well, it's the old economic axiom. It's as simple as this: one person's spending is another person's income. You can't spend money you don't have. Well, you can. It's called credit card debt, and it's actually choking the economy. But that's another story for another time. You usually can't even get a credit card unless you have a job. The job pays you money, you spend money on goods and services. That means other people can have jobs providing those goods and services. And they spend their job money and it circulates. The money is moving. All depends on jobs. More jobs, more money moving around. It's good. It's decent. What is a job? It's interesting to break it down, get to the basics. This, all of this, our world, this is the human race and the survival of it. In order to survive, we have formed societies where we depend on each other to complete tasks, jobs. As this society functions, something always needs doing. Jobs. Most people don't altruistically do things to keep a society functioning. Volunteer rates are never very high, so we make those things jobs. We arrange compensation, remuneration, and again, this economy based on spending. Our society, with its benefits and its flaws, is what it is. As mentioned at the beginning, if people don't do all of these jobs, society would collapse. It happens. We've seen it. When people can't do their jobs due to famine or fire or flood, societies do collapse, and they have to start all over again. And within this complex mechanism, each part is essential. Granted, we give greater importance and compensation to certain jobs, but the Prime Minister and the heart surgeon couldn't properly do their jobs unless someone didn't clean the bathroom. Here is an interesting discussion/party game you can play. I just heard this recently, and it's partly what got me thinking about jobs. And it comes from writer Jason Pargin, who I follow from time to time on social. This is his thing, and I'll give you the short version. You can start a utopian society. You're given a large piece of fertile land. A bunch of people move there, and it's working great. Everyone pursues their own happiness. There's plenty of food, and everyone gets along. Suddenly, though, the main supply warehouse needs repair. Upon inspection, it's concluded that it will take 100 people to properly fix the warehouse. You put the word out, and only 50 people show up. What do? By the rules of your society, you can't just force people to do it. You can walk around and try and convince 50 more people that they should volunteer, but they may not want to, and for a number of legitimate reasons. You can offer to pay some people, but that's a disservice to those 50 who volunteered. What do you do? Point is, jobs need doing, or societies collapse. There's always been this structural mismatch between people seeking meaningful jobs and all of those other jobs in our society that simply must be done. Sometimes that leads to labor shortages, often called a skills gap. Again, what do you do? In the Western world, sometimes we rely on immigration. People from other countries will come here to do the jobs that we don't want to do, because even doing those jobs is better than the existence they have in their own country. And that works, but only for a while, and you end up with jobs that nobody wants to do. Oddly, the most reasonable answer to all of this is robotics and AI. You know, throughout history, machines were invented to either ease the jobs or do the jobs that humans disliked. Often we found these machines increased productivity. But now we're at this stage, or will be any minute now, where machines can do anything and everything that humans can do. Are we prepared? Here's a job stat that always gives people pause. Approximately 80% of jobs in North America are in the service industry. Impossible. No way, you say. Well, think about it. There are goods and there are services. And unless, at the end of the day, you've made a Toyota or grown a turnip, you're in the service industry. Legal, medical, education, transportation, shipping, finance, media, military, paramilitary, science, sales, technology, retail, government. The list goes on. These are all service jobs. It's what North America does. It's what we're good at. Yeah, I know sometimes the service sucks. That's just someone doing a poor job. Manufacturing left us a long time ago, and it's not coming back, at least not in any impactful way. That's why I'm always confused by the Donald Trumps and Doug Fords of the world, whose populist policies are often based on bringing back manufacturing, reopening the factories. This is how they'll create jobs for Canadians and Americans. Are we relying on our governments to create jobs? Governments don't create jobs. They're supposed to create an environment where it's easier for the private sector to create jobs. And why conservatives are always so focused on manufacturing, I don't know. Let me get this straight. You want new generations of workers to aspire to a mind-numbing factory job? A hard hat, a reflective vest, and protective goggles, where you do a repetitive task hour after hour, day after day, year after year, until your soul suffocates itself? How is that the promise of a better future? Explain that one, Donnie, Dougie. Anyone?
Anyone?
Back to the good old days? Is that what you think? Were they that good? Are you remembering those days correctly? Show me a factory worker from the 50s who didn't want something better for his children. We always used to ask, what kind of job do you have? Do you have to shower before work or after work? Trump and Ford want you to have to shower after work. These are the jobs they're promising to bring back. And hey, people do those jobs, and thanks to unions, they make decent money, good money. I respect that. We need those jobs. But manufacturing in North America, that was then. This is now. Of course, doctor, lawyer, banker, welder, they're all jobs. And all jobs can be mind-numbing, regardless of what you do. As the old saying goes, no one on their deathbed says, gee, I wish I would have worked more. And they also say, if you want to ruin your favorite pastime, try doing it for a living. I remember every time I played golf, we would always talk about how great it would be to be a professional golfer, just to do this for a living. And we'd never think, of course, of all the training and the travel and the practice and more practice and the pressure. No, we just want to golf all the time and get paid for it. Sure, some people make a living doing what they love, and some are very successful at it. Those are usually the people that show up and give a commencement speech and tell the graduates, follow your dream. Follow your dream. Not so sure about that. There's another school of thought lately that says, why don't you just instead find out what it is you're good at and what you could do for a few decades without losing your mind, and then do that. Because no kid dreams about one day being a tax consultant. No, they want to be a baseball star or a race car driver. Follow your dream? Sure, maybe you'll be part of that less than 0.1% that actually makes it. And you'd have to have the skills in the first place. Follow the dream or find out what you are good at. Make lots of money at it, and one day you can buy yourself a sports car and go to fantasy camp. Do you know only about half the people surveyed say that they have job satisfaction? The percentage is even smaller among younger demographics. I would even argue that older people aren't necessarily satisfied at work. They've just reached a level of tolerance. They've just accepted the equation. If I want to have this, then I got to do this. Young people aren't there yet. They haven't quite realized, this is what it's like to go to work every day. Management knows it. Of course, management knows that having a job sucks. That's why they have Pizza Tuesdays and staff bowling nights. And every year they throw you a Christmas party. They're saying, hey, we know working is shitty. How about some distractions? Why do you think people decorate their workplace? Put up pictures of their loved ones around. It's not a reminder that I love these people, but rather one of, this is why I'm doing this thing that I don't like. As alluded to earlier, conditions on the job aren't there to make your job enjoyable, just bearable. It was Henry Ford who invented the 40-hour work week, shorter hours, and better conditions, because they boosted productivity and increased employee loyalty. Same reason the coffee break was invented. And note that these provisions, and even the modern ones like pizza lunch and free bowling, are put in place to not actually benefit the worker. It's usually a strategy to keep up a level of productivity and offer a wage that they feel they can get away with. That's why governments have to legislate something we call a minimum wage. Think about that, minimum wage. What's the least amount we can pay according to the law? Okay, let's just pay that. If there was no law, we would actually pay less. In recent years, advocates have begun to talk about a living wage, a wage that lets you cover the cost of basic necessities without having to take a second job, also known as a decent wage. Business people don't want to pay that. There's that minimum. We'll just pay that. And usually in a state or province, you have to make do with that minimum wage, whether you live in a small town or a big city. It's the same wage. Good luck. So we're back to the Elon Musk prediction, which he says could be only about 20 years away. Human jobs, optional. I guess, after all, robotics can make all the goods. AI can provide most of the services. So what do we do? Well, we could just collect that universal high income and pursue whatever we think is going to make us happy in our new utopian society. It makes sense in principle. We could all just sit on the beach and fish. Incidentally, this universal high income idea, governments have tried it, including some provincial governments in Canada. They experimented with something called the Basic Income Program. They do this in places where there aren't a lot of jobs. So instead of a welfare or employment insurance payment, governments provided basic incomes that covered basic needs. Results in local economies were usually pretty positive, but programs were ended due to long-term concerns, one of these being that a basic income creates a disincentive to work. And of course, political winds shift. Why should he get a handout and I have to work for everything I have? Narrow-minded yet popular sentiment. Elon's idea is a universal high income. No jobs, just large, equal handouts. I wouldn't mind seeing how this plays out.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37 at gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.